There seems to be this trend on YouTube for the past couple of years of high achievers showcasing how in 1 year they did 10 times the amount that you seem to have achieved in your entire life up until this point. And I think you can watch these types of videos and get quite disenfranchised, like you're feeling left behind. If you just search that term and scroll through, there's just countless videos with hundreds of thousands and millions of views. And when you look at the before and afters of these people, it's no wonder that people feel like this, because the gap between the two is massive. But in a video, you can see a year's worth of work in a minute. And in 5 minutes, you can see 5 years worth of work. Sure, David Goggins on the bell curve of lifetime achievement probably is in the top percentile, but the chances are, if you're an average person, you're here. I mean, you're guaranteed to be here because that's where average is. Now, I'm not going to promise results in this video that you'll be able to go from old David Goggins to multi-millionaire six-pack ultra-marathon runner with the world record for pull-ups. But what I am going to do in this video is break some myths around goal setting and give you a simple 4-step process that I use to go from in the construction industry to a software engineer and from hating running to running ultra-marathons. And maybe by the end of it, you'll be in that sweet spot of above average where you haven't sacrificed your entire life to have noticeable improvement. But in 3 years' time, when you look back, you'll have noticeable milestones of significance. I love that quote by Alex Hormozy, where he says, "You don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. Outwork your self-doubt." So how do we go about building this stack? Well, I remember my first year of university where I decided that doing a degree wasn't enough and that actually I needed to also be learning alongside construction, psychology, and philosophy. And also I should be training like a bodybuilder while also trying to beat personal bests in the park run every single week. And what happened at the end of my first year when I was trying to tackle all of those things is I ended up achieving well below average in all of them. I failed basically my first year. I scraped through my first year of my degree. I didn't learn much in the other things I was trying to learn, and my fitness kind of just stagnated. And that's because I didn't have a clear goal. Now, this isn't to say that you can only do one thing at a time. It's not like, okay, if you're becoming a software engineer, you also can't learn how to run better, but have one thing at the top of your list. And if you aren't too sure what one thing would be best for you, write down your goals and pick the most important one. Multitasking doesn't work. If you're ever working on a problem, you'll realize that quite quickly the amount of time it takes to complete that problem, if you're also trying to solve multiple problems at the same time, trying to pick too many things at once is just going to overwhelm you, and you're going to end up having lackluster results in all of them. And that brings us to our first myth, which is, okay, you've picked a goal and you're probably going to want to go tell everybody about how you pick this goal and you're going to be a software engineer. Now, the problem is that the mechanisms in your brain that are used for moving towards a goal can be triggered acting out something that moves you towards a goal and talking about it. And that dopamine system has an amount that you can use. And if you use up 50% of it talking about it, you've only got 50% left to push you towards doing the things that will actually get the goal done. So don't tell people what you're working on. Just choose something and start working on it. Now, the balancing act here is you want to pick a goal that is achievable, but also is difficult. If you pick an impossible goal that from the outset you never would have achieved, like say you want to run an ultramarathon next week, then from the get-go your brain's going to know, okay, this isn't possible, and you're not going to be able to recruit the chemicals that you need to push you towards this. But then also, on the same side, if it's too easy, you can't trick yourself, and you're going to know that it's an easy goal, and you always could have achieved it, so you're less likely to put the effort into it. Right, okay, so here's the next one. There is a difference between people who want a six-pack versus people who are going to train abs 6 times a week, right? The person who wants the six-pack and just says, that'd be cool, in 6 months I want a six-pack. Yeah, sure, you might, 1 week try certain exercises, the next week you might try a different diet. But fundamentally, the person who commits to a habit and defines the habit is more likely in the long run to achieve the goal. And the game here is to define the verbs that are going to get you towards your goal. In a previous video, I broke down the time horizon for how long it would take to go from no experience to software engineer. And one of the ways that you would do this is, okay, I know how many hours it takes. I'm going to commit to 3 hours a day of working through that program, of 8% of my time being theory, 16% of my time being building a project, and then the rest working with existing code, right? So what's better than, okay, I want to be a software engineer, is I'm going to work 2 hours a day on becoming a software engineer. So let's strike that out. Okay, so you know what the goal is and what you're going to do to do it, we need some way of measuring the outcome. So you've picked your goal and you've defined your verbs. Now, okay, so say you're training for running. This is cool. You've picked your goal and you've defined the verbs. I'm going to run every other day because that's how long it takes to recover. And I want to run an ultramarathon. So every other day you do an hour's worth of zone 2 training, and that distance is going to increase because your endurance is going to get better. Well, that's all well and good, but it doesn't translate directly to the actual task of running an ultramarathon. You need some way of checking in occasionally to make sure that you're still on the right path. So you need to measure your progress. So pick a time 12 weeks out from now where we're going to reassess how close towards your goal you are. So say you're doing generic training, or in the case of a software engineer, you're doing varied learning. You need to do something at the end of that 12 weeks, which is going to give you a better understanding of how close you are to achieving your goal. So in the case of an ultramarathon, you've been doing, that 2 hour per day, take 3 days off and then just go for a long run. Pick something challenging and see how far you get, because it could be that you only manage 42 kilometers, which is a marathon, but it also could be that you exceed the distance that you're training for. You don't know until you test it. And at this point, if you fail, then you can reassess what you're putting in, say, I'm nowhere near my goal. Maybe it requires more than 2 hours a day. Or maybe you're overworking and you can pull back a bit. Fundamentally, you just want to make sure that your trajectory is upwards. Right, so lastly, and this is the thing that David Goggins likes to talk about, where he says, I actually hate running. He wakes up and he just stares at his shoes until he wants to go out. How do you initiate that action that pushes you towards your goal? Well, this is a pretty simple decision tree. First of all, ask yourself, do you actually want to do it? Well, if not, maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and pick a different goal. If you do, the question is, right, do I want to do the action? Now, there's going to be some days where you're excited to work towards your goal and some days where you're just not going to be feeling it. So there's two things that you can do to trick your brain into propelling you towards the thing that you want to do. But either way, you should try this. This is a daily thing. On the days where you've got your verb, so in the case of running, it was every other day, but in the case of software engineering, let's say every day, ask yourself this question: do I want to do the 2 hours or do I want to do the 1 hour run? If the answer is no, visualize failure. So imagine the consequences of not doing the action. You're basically painting a picture of your hell of, in the case of doing the running, I'll get out of shape, I'll lose all my gains, I've booked in to do an ultramarathon, and if I don't do this training, I'm going to get to the ultramarathon because I've paid the money to do it, and I'm only going to get halfway, and then I'm going to have to walk home with a did not finish, If the answer is yes, think through the action. Think, I'm going to put my shoes on, I'm going to go out, I'm going to go do the run, I'm going to get to X point, I'm going to run back, take my shoes off, and then maybe I'll reward myself. And what both of these are doing is, depending on your emotion to the goal, this is going to optimize your brain's ability to give you the motivation to go and do the thing to get it done. The last action here is the trick of what I just said there. So when you get to the end, you want to reward yourself so that you have that kind of, I did the thing that was difficult, I've earned this. But don't do it all the time, because rewards are a diminishing return game, and if you reward yourself too much, it's going to be harder to motivate doing the action. So a cheap and easy trick to do this is just flip a coin. Go on the internet, if you type into Google, flip a coin, it's going to either give you heads or tails. If it's what you guess, treat yourself. If it isn't, don't. Like, for me, that might be playing a video game or having a beer. Now, if you put this system into play, you should be able to go from your average guy to somebody who maybe after 6 months you managed to achieve that ultramarathon that you wanted to work towards, or after 6 months you get that role as a software engineer. What I can do for you is in this video here, I show you how in 3 months you can realistically go from a complete beginner in coding to sprint ready. But otherwise, I hope this helps, and cheers.